Now, for more on the Iran-US tensions, we're joined by Glaser, Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Thanks for joining us, John. As we mentioned earlier, a funeral for the Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani, killed in the US airstrike, has taken place in Baghdad. Now, if Iran does retaliate, what is the likely form of revenge will this be, do you think?
Well, Iran knows that they're outmatched conventionally and really in every other sphere when compared to the United States. But they do have some asymmetric tactics at their disposal. And they have assets in Syria and Iraq and possibly Yemen. They'll probably utilize some cyber capabilities. I mean, these are the assets and tools that they have at their disposal. But, I would hesitate to actually make a prediction about when and in what form this will all unravel.
Could this have an impact on allies of the US, such as Australia? Scott Morrison has called for de-escalation of tensions in the Middle East.
Well, I don't know about the impact on Australia. I mean, I think the region itself is about to see an uptick in violence. It's hard to overstate how important a figure Soleimani was in Iran and how unstable the interstate relations in the region are right now. It's kind of, we've lit a fuse and things were already pretty bad. And so I think what we have to do is look really closely at the justifications for this strike and think about what kind of strategy the administration thinks it's actually pursuing. I don't think there's much there.
Yeah, it's frightening times, isn't it? What are the other leaders around the other countries saying at all?
Well, I think there's caution in places like Europe that haven't made too much of a comment yet. Most relevantly, I think, is the comments from the Iraqi prime minister, who stated pretty boldly that this was a direct and egregious violation of the very agreement that his government and our government have that authorize U.S. troops' presence there. If we're violating Iraqi sovereignty and Iraqi permission as we're doing this, kind of undermines the case for us remaining there. And of course, that would be consistent with what the Iraqi people think. And from a strategic perspective, I think it would be beneficial if we took a big step back from this region. It seems to me that we are one of the primary destabilizers and disruptors, to say nothing of the actors in the region.
Iraq is the parliament set to meet in a few days. What do you think will be discussed?
Well, whatever response the Iranians eventually come out with is going to come after a lot of deliberation and calculation. They're not going to rashly kind of launch something without thinking through the consequences. They know that the President of the United States is somewhat unstable and erratic in his policy positions, and they understand the risks that they face in retaliating. But they do want to make clear that these kinds of actions can't go without some costs, and they're looking for ways to impose those costs. So we'll have to see. It's still a developing situation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 3 days of mourning in Iran, and certainly the reaction has been quite mixed emotions of some people applauding, some people very angry and upset. So what more can you tell us?
Well, there's a lot of consternation about, whether this Iranian general was a bad guy and whether or not he deserved to die. And I don't think those are the proper questions to be asking. The questions to be asking is this in U.S. interests? And are we prepared to handle the fallout, which will inevitably follow? I don't think those questions were asked, and certainly not rigorously studied prior to the Trump administration's decision to do this. I think it's a pretty rash and destabilizing posture, and I think we need to reevaluate it as soon as possible because war could, in fact, unravel in the Middle East.
President Donald Trump spoke at an evangelical event. He mentioned that he was plotting the attack and they stopped for good. We've just got some vision on screen at the moment. Apparently, he moved on quite quickly with that speech.
Yeah, look, the justifications, first the administration came out and said that this attack preempted an imminent threat to U.S. persons in the region. And if you look at what the State Department has said in the aftermath of those initial statements, it seems pretty clear to me that that's not true at all. This was a political assassination mulled over for a matter of weeks, and it was intended to have a political effect, a deterrence effect perhaps, but it was not to protect American lives. It wouldn't even make much sense why decapitating the head of the Quds Force in Iran would stop, some kind of imminent ongoing threat to U.S. persons. He's the guy at the top. He orders and coordinates and plans some of these operations, but he's not the one that carries them out. So the whole basis for the legitimacy, legal, strategic, and otherwise, for this strike and this assassination, I think doesn't pass muster.
John Glaser, Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, really appreciate your expertise and time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.